Yeah.
Anthony Joshua's gigantic.
So big.
He's so big. He's so much bigger. So, of course, like, his punch that he knocks Tyron Woodley out cold with, Joshua just eats it.
Yeah.
As Jake felt his punching power, those doubts AJ seeded in his mind were surely consuming Jake's inner monologue, because what was occurring in the fight validated what AJ had said.
I do think it is a freak show, if I'm honest. I also think it's dangerous. I'm sat here as a boxing promoter and I see what goes on with the medicals before and after fights and how dangerous the sport is. And I saw Callum Simpson.
Joe Rogan is completely losing it over what happened to Jake Paul after that brutal knockout. And he's putting the spotlight directly on Anthony Joshua's sheer dominance inside the ring. When Rogan talks about Joshua being absolutely gigantic, he is not exaggerating or casually throwing words around. He's pointing to a size difference that becomes genuinely terrifying when you imagine two people facing each other in a boxing match. The physical gap between these two fighters was enormous, and Rogan explains exactly why that gap matters so much. He breaks down one specific moment, a devastating right-hand punch that Joshua landed, and the way Rogan describes it makes you almost feel the impact yourself. Joshua did not land a glancing blow or catch Paul off guard with a lucky shot. This was full force, maximum power, a punch backed by years of professional heavyweight training. The damage was catastrophic. That single punch broke Jake Paul's jaw in 2 places, not cracked it, not bruised it, but actually fractured the bone in multiple locations. Rogan repeatedly stresses that when you face someone of Joshua's size, strength, and power, you are not just fighting a skilled opponent. You are facing a completely different level of challenge, one that goes beyond normal boxing matchups and enters the realm of real physical danger.
I give Jake so much credit for stepping into that ring.
Bro, he got hit with a bomb,
Yeah.
a right-hand bomb.
When he got hit with that too, I don't know if enough has been made of the fact that, I mean, it was absolutely devastating.
Joe Rogan goes deep into the aftermath of the fight and does not hold back at all when describing how badly Jake Paul was hurt and what actually unfolded inside that ring. This was not about normal bumps and bruises that fade away after a few days. The injuries Jake suffered were severe, the kind of damage that can threaten an entire career and carry real, lasting consequences. Rogan points out that Jake literally lost teeth during the beating, which alone says a lot about the power of the shots he was taking. But the issue goes far beyond what you can immediately see. As Rogan explains it, Jake is now struggling with basic functions like eating properly, and that might sound small until you understand what it means for a professional athlete who depends on peak physical condition. The jaw injury, combined with the overall trauma, has turned something as simple as eating into a painful and difficult task. This is where Rogan's concern really becomes clear. He is not just reacting to one bad night in the ring. He is warning about a pattern and what happens when someone keeps taking mismatched fights like this. Rogan believes that if Jake continues accepting bouts against opponents who are much bigger, much stronger, and far more experienced, it could realistically end his career, and not years down the line, but possibly very soon. The long-term risks from repeated head trauma, facial injuries, and cumulative damage from fighting above your weight class or skill level are enormous. Rogan criticizes the mindset of taking unnecessary risks just for entertainment or name value, and he is essentially urging Jake to seriously rethink his future matchups if he wants to protect his health and have any real longevity in boxing.
Yeah.
And breaks his jaw in 2 places.
Yeah. And
He's fucked. His jaw's wired shut now. He lost teeth.
See, I mean, he made it to the 6th round.
Yeah.
Pretty wild.
Did they put your teeth back in when they pop out like that, or are they gone forever?
I don't know. But it's just wired shut for like 6 weeks now.
Yeah. You got to eat nothing but protein shakes. Bro.
Oof.
It's a crazy world.
Psychologist Derek Van Schick steps into the discussion with a serious analysis that goes far beyond the visible physical damage, emphasizing that the risk Jake Paul faced against Anthony Joshua was never hypothetical or exaggerated. This was a real and immediate danger that unfolded exactly as critics feared, and the injuries Paul suffered were not minor issues you simply recover from in a few weeks. Van Schick explains how Joshua's combination of raw power and technical precision created an extremely dangerous environment for Paul from the opening bell. This was not a case of a big fighter throwing careless punches and hoping one landed. Joshua is an elite, professionally trained heavyweight with years of experience who understands how to place his shots for maximum impact. Van Schick highlights one especially devastating moment, a right-hand punch delivered with such force and accuracy that it fractured Jake's lower jaw in 2 separate places. To understand why this matters, a broken jaw is not just about intense pain during the fight itself. It leads to long-lasting functional problems that can stretch on for months, including difficulty eating, trouble speaking clearly, potential issues with jaw alignment, and in some cases permanent nerve damage that affects facial sensation. Van Schick explains that injuries of this magnitude have serious implications for a fighter's career path because once you suffer this level of trauma, you become more vulnerable to similar injuries in the future. Scar tissue, the way the bone heals, and the psychological impact of knowing what can happen if you are hit in that same spot again all change how a fighter approaches their career. He repeatedly stresses that stepping into the ring with a larger and far more experienced opponent like Joshua does not just slightly raise the risk, it multiplies the chances of catastrophic and potentially life-altering damage. According to Van Schick, this fight is a clear example of how mismatched bouts, even when entertaining for audiences, can place athletes in situations with consequences that extend far beyond the final bell, underscoring the importance of preparation, careful opponent selection, and respect for the real dangers of combat sports at the highest level.
Little lower to land that clean right-hand punch on the side of Jake's face, which fractured his lower jaw, still hospitalizing Jake Paul, but not actually killing him.
If Anthony Joshua won, Anthony killed this guy. Rolls-Royce, Fiat.
The variety of emotions we see in the final moments of the fight are fascinating. AJ finally corners Jake, hits him with a quick left-hand jab to the body, which lowers his guard, opening up a clean right-hand shot to the head. You can see AJ smile there when he sees Jake had fallen into his trap and knows that he's about to finish him off.
And then you just keep exploiting. Some people give up. Some people get knocked out.
Jake's body language and facial expressions when he knows it's all over for him is a little sad as he whimpers in the corner with that scared, nauseous look on his face, realizing this may—
Man, if I take a shot like that, I am completely done, and I am not exaggerating at all. The power behind a punch thrown by someone at Anthony Joshua's level is enough to change everything in a split second. You might tell yourself he will never land something like that, but that mindset is exactly what gets people into serious trouble when they are facing true elite heavyweight power.
Jake's eyes and face, he's pleading for mercy to AJ as if he's a child. Please don't do this.
Some people get knocked out.
It's actually quite surreal that the moment many of us were concerned what happened to Jake actually happened in real life.
If Jake Paul is left, up against the ropes with Anthony Joshua, unloading on him, could be the end for him, literally. It could be his last day on earth.
Jake Paul was helplessly exhausted, badly beaten, and cornered where AJ could have unloaded a flurry of clean punches on Jake. When he takes that clean right shot from AJ, breaking his jaw in 2 places and then falls to the ground.
And his chin served on him.
This is where the situation becomes especially interesting from a psychological standpoint, because many people genuinely question why Jake seemed excited heading into this fight, almost as if he did not fully understand what he was stepping into. Ben Shalom then enters the conversation with the sharply critical assessment of the Anthony Joshua versus Jake Paul matchup, offering a brutally honest take and labeling it a dangerous spectacle that crossed far beyond acceptable limits. Shalom argues, and does so convincingly, that unlike certain crossover events that can be framed as entertainment without serious competitive consequences, this fight carried very real physical risks that were either ignored or knowingly brushed aside by those involved. He emphasizes that the bout was driven primarily by money, putting profit, pay-per-view sales, and commercial appeal ahead of fighter safety measures that should be non-negotiable in any legitimate sporting contest. Shalom does not stop with the promoters or the fighters who agreed to the matchup, but also directs his criticism toward the officials, referees, and ringside doctors who are meant to serve as the final safeguard when a fight becomes dangerous. In his view, they failed in their core responsibility by not stopping the bout when it clearly should have been halted, allowing it to continue to a stage where serious injury was not just a possibility, but nearly unavoidable given the mismatch. Shalom maintains that pushing fighters under such conditions, where the imbalance is obvious and the risks are clear, crosses a line and turns what should be a regulated sport into something far more troubling, a scenario that prioritizes spectacle over human well-being. For him, this fight stands as a stark warning of what happens when entertainment value and massive financial incentives outweigh basic health and safety in boxing, making it a wake-up call the sport can no longer afford to ignore.
On the Jake Paul, Anthony Joshua circumstance, I mean, a lot of people talking about the discredit it does to boxing. I don't put it in the category of boxing. I put it in the category of entertainment, and Anthony Joshua being introduced to America as a media star. What's your overall view of what it does or doesn't do for boxing? Jake Paul being licensed in a fight that many people think that he shouldn't have been licensed to fight, in a commission that often does that. As a promoter, do you think it's a bad look for boxing, or are you thinking it doesn't really matter, it's not really what boxing's about?
I usually and have said in the past that things can be things, you know, you've got to take it for what they are. But in this occasion, I do think it is a freak show, if I'm honest. I also think it's dangerous. I'm sat here as a boxing promoter and I see what goes on with the medicals before and after fights and how dangerous the sport is. And I saw Callum Simpson, the fight should have been stopped way before it was, but was in trouble on Saturday night. It's all a bit of fun and it's all a money grab until someone gets seriously hurt, seriously damaged, and then the whole sport comes into disrepute. For me, it makes a mockery of the sport of boxing. For me, it's no one in the industry wants to talk badly about it because everyone's lined, the pockets are getting lined. And when you look at that, and kids will look at that, and fans will look at that, and sponsors will look at that and think that that is boxing, as I say, we're one punch away from something serious. And yeah, it's
on the flip side of that argument, mate, you will tell me that you knew that Chris Eubank wasn't right to go into that fight.
No, but let's be completely honest, right? Whatever you want to say about that fight, these are two experienced professional fighters. Chris Eubank Jr. has been in fights previously in his career where he's not been 100.
Now let's focus on what actually unfolded during the fight itself, because the visual reality of what Jake Paul faced was genuinely hard to watch for anyone who understands boxing. Paul stepped into an extremely difficult situation when he went up against a much larger and significantly taller Anthony Joshua, and that size difference was not just obvious. It was a fundamental factor that influenced every single exchange in the ring. Throughout the fight, Paul was repeatedly dropped to a knee, and each of those moments carried risks far beyond the punch that initially sent him down. Every time he hit the canvas, there was a very real threat of serious ligament damage to his knees and legs, the kind of injuries that can linger for years or even end a career altogether. This is similar to what happened to Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. during his brutal fight with Sergio Martinez, where the repeated knockdowns caused cumulative damage that went far beyond head trauma alone. Those constant trips to the canvas highlighted just how dangerous and, frankly, misguided it was for Paul to face someone with Joshua's size, reach, and level of professional experience. The physical toll of fighting an opponent of that magnitude is not limited to shots absorbed to the head, but extends to the entire body taking repeated impact. Joints and ligaments are pushed beyond their normal limits. Muscles are forced into defensive positions they are not conditioned to hold, and the body is stressed in ways that become increasingly dangerous when matched against that level of power and physical dominance.
Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. was losing every round to Sergio Martinez, and then Martinez fell to the ground kind of weird. He messed up his knee. He was never the same fighter. So you got a broken jaw, but you could have tore ligaments in your knee by having a 260-pound man, fall on top of you because you keep making it sloppy and falling around and spilling about. And even if you don't like rupture something or tear a ligament or whatever, it's not really much better than someone leaning on you. Do you know how much energy you exert by having to be 220 pounds or whatever, 216, and keep picking yourself back up? Like I seen a thing, I didn't count myself, but it said there were 12 or 13, maybe 14 times that Jake Paul was on the canvas. horrible strategy. And Netflix, I don't even see how they would like that. And for me, this generation is, look, they're chopped, bro. Jake Paul did all this, and y'all want me to give a bunch of credit. Jake Paul did all this talking about Joshua getting knocked out. You did whatever to sell the fight, but you didn't make good. That doesn't make you look good when you talk crazy and talk spicy, and then you have no intentions of fulfilling that. And then you got the Jake Paul fans and the Andrew Tate fans, because they lost kind of back to back, where they're trying their hardest to turn this into some.
Brendan Schaub entered the discussion with what many viewed as a refreshingly honest and realistic take on Jake Paul's matchup against Anthony Joshua, and he did not sugarcoat anything when he made it clear that the idea of Paul winning this fight was never realistic, not even remotely close. Schaub laid out the massive skill gap between the two fighters, and this was not a small difference, but a comparison between someone with only a few years of celebrity boxing experience and an Olympic-level athlete who has been refining his craft at the highest level for decades. He explained that while Joshua's raw strength alone is dangerous, it is the combination of that power with precision, timing, and deep strategic ring experience that made it almost impossible for Paul to compete on anything resembling equal footing. Schaub also highlighted a critical point that often gets lost amid hype and social media noise, noting that while platforms like Instagram and Twitter created enormous buzz and framed the fight as potentially competitive, the reality inside the ring was completely different. According to Schaub, the bout was structured and promoted more as a spectacle for entertainment purposes than as a legitimate athletic contest between properly matched competitors. Paul was dealing with challenges that extended far beyond his current experience level, and anyone with genuine boxing knowledge could see that mismatch instantly. The fight ultimately exposed, in the clearest possible way, the sharp contrast between hype-driven expectations built on social media popularity, followings, and promotional attention, and the harsh reality of true competitive ability when standing across from an elite opponent like Anthony Joshua. Schaub strongly emphasized that real boxing skill, developed through years of disciplined training, countless rounds of sparring, and authentic professional competition, cannot be replaced or offset by fame, media presence, or promotional momentum, especially when facing fighters who sit at the absolute top tier of the sport.
Jake Paul beat Anthony Joshua. That's insane. That's not real. That's not real in any facet. There was never a chance. There's never a chance. And the Jake Paul fans, and I was getting this a ton from DMs and comments going, well, everyone has a puncher's chance. That's an uneducated opinion. A puncher's chance, yes. If they're in a bar and Anthony Joshua's there at the pub and Jake Paul were to sneak up behind him and hit him in the back of the head or, in the side or something, maybe, even then, he's a little light in the ass, but maybe that's a puncher's chance. In a professional bout where a professional fighter at the level of Anthony Joshua is at, and he is going into a ring knowing and expecting to get hit, there is no puncher's chance when there's that much discrepancy in talent level. There's not, especially when the size difference. And some of you will say, Jake Paul hits hard. To you, yes, to you. But also, Jake Paul hits hard for a 200-pound man. He wouldn't even measure in the top 1,000 professional heavyweight boxers in the world as far as the strength knockout meter, if there is such a thing. It's not possible. So a lot of you were tuning in for saying, well, he has a puncher's chance. That's not real. That doesn't exist here. And now they could do this, but I don't think it's going to get the same amount of views, but it would set expectations. If, when this fight was announced, Jake Paul's...
After the fight ended and the dust finally settled, analysts across the boxing world were quick to agree that Jake Paul's bout against Anthony Joshua clearly exposed the true limits of his abilities as a professional boxer. While Paul has undeniably gained massive attention and built a huge following through his crossover boxing career, and no one can deny his promotional success, facing a legitimate top-tier heavyweight revealed serious gaps in his fundamental skill set that no amount of hype could conceal. Observers and professional analysts pointed to several specific weaknesses in his overall game, starting with stamina and conditioning, noting that maintaining performance over multiple rounds against an elite, highly experienced opponent is far more demanding than anything his previous fights against YouTubers or MMA fighters ever required. Technical shortcomings also became obvious once the fight progressed, including core elements like footwork, which determines a fighter's ability to create angles and avoid damage, defensive awareness that prevents walking into power shots, and ring generalship that allows control over distance and pace. Analysts repeatedly emphasized that true high-level boxing demands consistency across all these areas, discipline in both preparation and execution, and the capacity to adjust strategy in real time when facing elite opponents, qualities Paul has not yet fully demonstrated. For many, the fight represented a necessary reality check, showing that while entertainment value and promotional skill can elevate a fighter's profile and earnings, they cannot hide or compensate for genuine limitations when competing at the highest level of a sport, where the margin for error is virtually non-existent.
Or you put on a pair of boxing gloves. That does not mean that you will be perceived as legitimate. It doesn't mean people will be willing to pay to watch you fight. Me personally, I was done with Jake Paul after the pretend fight that he had with Mike Tyson last year. Clearly, I'm not the only one, because viewership for his fight last weekend with Anthony Joshua, it was significantly lower than a real fight between
Derek Chisora, known for never holding back his opinions, was blunt and brutally honest in his assessment of Jake Paul's fight against Anthony Joshua, making it clear that simply stepping into the ring and showing up does not automatically earn respect in the boxing world, and that frustration was evident in the way he spoke about it. Chisora stressed passionately that real bravery in boxing is not just about physical presence or a willingness to take punishment, but about serious preparation, months and years spent developing real technical skill, and the ability to face legitimate challenges with discipline, intelligence, and strategic thinking rather than relying on toughness alone. He outright dismissed the praise and comparisons circulating on social media and from certain figures in the sport, arguing that they ignored the reality of what actually took place, which was a severe mismatch between Paul and a far more experienced, stronger opponent who held every meaningful advantage. According to Chisora, enduring dangerous conditions or absorbing big shots does not prove credibility or toughness in boxing, and setting that as the standard undermines what the sport truly represents. Genuine respect, he argued, must be earned through demonstrating technical proficiency across all aspects of boxing, making smart decisions in both fight selection and in-ring strategy, and delivering consistent performances under real pressure against properly matched opponents, not by simply surviving a high-risk fight that likely should never have been sanctioned. Chisora's comments serve as a clear reminder that spectacle, entertainment value, pay-per-view numbers, and social media engagement are not the same as authentic achievement in boxing, and confusing the two ultimately does a disservice to the sport itself.
The pressure. I think AJ's demeanor in the build-up was someone who was like, you know what, everyone's saying these things, but this is how I see it. Yeah, I rate him. He can box a bit. He did say in an interview with Steve Bunce that like when he was talking certain things, there's a part of me that wants to punch him in his face, but I'm just gonna chill. And I feel like that's how he handled the immense pressure.
The last time we saw AJ fuming like this, like when he actually tried to do something, was with Dylan. So we should not judge him when he says something like this, because when he don't say nothing, we say, oh, why is he not saying anything back? Yeah. And when he says something, we're like, oh, what did you say that for? You know, so the guy is not gonna win with anybody, because if he says something, you like, oh, you guys go against him. If he does not, so he's just madness. So
yeah, and Eddie said that as much as that, because we asked him. Well, I asked him about the comments about when AJ didn't threaten to kill Jake, but he said, if I can kill you, I will. And Eddie said, look, people say he's too media trained and he's too boring, and then when he says something, everyone's up in arms about it. So I understand that.
That's why I think it's balanced. That's why I think the build.
When you step back and look at the bigger picture, The fight against Anthony Joshua functioned as both a massive spectacle that generated enormous attention and revenue, and simultaneously as a cautionary tale that the boxing world must take seriously moving forward. Jake Paul's social media-driven fame and prior victories against carefully selected opponents could not shield him from the harsh reality of facing a legitimate heavyweight champion with Olympic pedigree and years of elite-level experience. Analysts across the sport agreed on several key takeaways from this matchup. First, real professional boxing experience, proper preparation with qualified trainers and sparring partners, and genuine technical skill far outweigh hype, promotional ability, or social media bravado when it comes to actual in-ring performance. Second, safety must remain an absolute priority in combat sports, and stronger safeguards are needed to prevent mismatches that place fighters at unnecessary risk. This bout vividly highlighted the limits of crossover boxing as a concept and exposed the very real dangers that arise when a fighter is pushed beyond their competitive readiness, weight class, or skill level, primarily for financial gain. The fight carries lasting implications not only for Paul's career, which now faces serious questions about where he can realistically go from here, but also for boxing as a whole in terms of how celebrity crossover bouts should be regulated and sanctioned. Analysts argue persuasively that this particular matchup prioritized financial gain and media spectacle over genuine athletic competition, putting Paul in serious danger when anyone with experience could foresee this outcome. The mismatch between Paul and Joshua, in both physical size and professional experience, demonstrated in the clearest terms how the pursuit of massive paydays can outweigh safety and sporting integrity, which should be central to any legitimate athletic commission decisions. The resulting injuries Paul sustained, the broken jaw, lost teeth, and ongoing struggles with basic functions, serve as a stark and undeniable reminder of the very real risks inherent in high-profile mismatches, promoted more for entertainment than competitive legitimacy.
The ring with him. And I think a lot of things were revealed inside the ring. You know, all the grabbing of the leg and stuff like that. That shouldn't have been. You know, that almost looked like it reminded me of Troy. You guys remember Troy when Orlando Bloom's character grabbed his brother's leg, you know? You know what I mean? It looked like he was desperately scared, you know? But I think he should have been desperately scared because AJ was coming to hurt him. This wasn't a Mike Tyson fight. He wasn't 58 years old. This dude is 36. And Anthony Joshua, like he said, because I've heard AJ say stuff like that. Hey, I'm going to F you up. He said the same thing to Helenius. Because he thought Helenius was looking at him crazy. And it's like, what do you know, why are you looking at me like that? Right? And Helenius like, huh? You know. And what happened to Helenius? He got knocked out, and needless to say, he tested positive for something. But yeah, so if you hear AJ say, hey, I'm going to F you up. Oh yeah. That's what he means. And I think Jake Paul knew it. You know what I mean? He avoided a lot of big shots at the beginning of that fight, you know? But then as AJ started getting closer and those punches started getting, you know, more in range of hitting him, the grabbing happened a lot, you know, more, you know. He started gripping off for dear life. And, you know, $90 million, you know, would anyone do it?
That's it for today's video. Stay tuned for more, and until next time.